G'day, welcome to an FJ40 2F engine puzzle. A friend of mine needed a hand to put this together. So as you can see, these are the componentry he's dropped off for me. Thankfully he's bagged some of this stuff. Some of them still got labels. One piston, one rod, box full of bolts. New parts also included. Cylinder head has been serviced. Some sawdust floating around. Don't do this if you've send your cylinder head off for machining. Let's have a look at the cylinder block. So as you can see, it's a 2F, a bit dusty. This is a crank gear. As you can see, it's not very healthy. After giving it a clean, found quite a lot of water damage. This needs to be replaced. Cam gear, let's have a look at that. This is what it looks like when it came off the cam. That's also badly water damaged, a lot of corrosion. So that's going to need to be replaced as well. Thrust washer's not too bad. As you can see there, the gears have got water in between them. It needs to be replaced. Lifter's also badly damaged by water. Flywheel, water damaged. Just send it off for a quick machine. Other componentry, remember all this stuff has to be cleaned before it's assembled. So this is just a small quantity of the parts that need to be cleaned. This is going to give you an idea of how much work is involved in cleaning all this componentry. We see her at work for probably 3 or 4 hours. They'll bring them home, use wax and grease remover in the spray bottle, Scotch-Brite to give this a good rub down. Now this is just the componentry being covered with varnish from the oil. Probably a few years of neglect. This gives you an idea how much time it takes just to do one push rod. Obviously it's a 6-cylinder, so there's 12 of them to clean up. Then after I clean these up, the rest of the componentry, so bolts, plates, covers, all this needs to be cleaned before it's even inspected before you do an assembly. A little while later, one set of push rods cleaned up. This is another trick I do. These little containers have got the bolts for each assembly. In the bottom of the container, I'll fill it up with the wax and grease remover. Every day or so, give the container a shake. After it's been sitting for a while, I'll just pop the lid off of this and give you an indication of what it looks like. This can save a bit of time. The bolts come up pretty clean. Now, don't forget to do a good clean of the keyways. It's very important. If you don't clean them up properly, when you go to assemble it, the garbage that's in the keyway will gall up on the key. You'll have a false tension. That'll cause a problem in the future. Just remember to take the time and check every component when you're going through the cleanup. This is the banjo fitting that feeds the oil pump through to the block. This garbage here is sitting inside the banjo fitting. So if they'd gone together on the first startup, chances are that sludge would have gone straight through to a bearing or a lifter or something like that, or blocked the gallery, it'd cause a problem. After a few hours of cleaning up, here's a small componentry collection that's ready for inspection and assembly. New crank gear and cam gear, both pressed on, quite shiny. Fortunate they're still available. Thermostat housing, it's pretty gnarly. You can see that service area is just too badly pitted. They won't clean up. Luckily, these components are still available new. So the owner tracked this down, sent it over to me. A couple of the lifter bores had some minor watermarks in them. So I believe that once we give them a bit of a hone, clean up, they'll come up good. So this is how I give them a clean up. Good old Volkswagen push rod, Scotch-Brite, and some engine oil. Get the surface cleaned up and try and get some crosshatch back into them. Once we've got that completed, make sure you give all these bores a good clean out until that rag comes clean. So another part of inspection, mating surfaces like this is I normally go to a big machine file, check it for flatness, run it over the surface. As you can see, we've got quite a lot of warpage. Now, this is going to have a gasket in it, but at least try and have some straight, flat surface to give it half a chance of sealing. You run a flat machine file over it until we get a nice rub mark on both surfaces. After spending some time machining of this surface, didn't come up too bad. So this will give it a chance to seal. So get the angry end out, get rid of some of this surface corrosion that's on here. And again, we'll get the file out, give this a rub down. You see there's quite a few holes that are either raised or been damaged as it's been removed. And we'd like to try and make sure we give the gaskets half a chance to seal. As I'm filing this, you'll see quite a few areas that come up shiny. They're the high sides or the high edges. They become reasonably flat after we do this. We also need to make sure that as you're going, give the file a good clean. The wire brush, you give the file a wash off or brush off. They'll get rid of any debris that's collected and will reduce any bad scoring. Turn it over and have a go on the other side. You've got to remember this plate also holds the cam thrust plate. So if this is badly damaged or badly warped, that's going to give us a problem. It's also got a oil gallery there you can see in the middle of the plate. That's an oil squirter that squirts oil onto the cam and crank gears. That keeps that lubricated. Once we got that done, we'll go to the next step. Okay, next, we'll grab the pistons and rods, make a reference to the location of the front of the engine. That's what the point is pointing to. That's their rod. So we need to pull these apart so we can have a look at them, make sure they're okay, give them a good clean up and have an inspection of the rods. Now these are a pinch bolt type little end. It's pretty old school these days. Fairly easy to remove, so we undo the pinch bolt, tap the pin, so the little end pin will come out, or the gudgeon pin. Discard the pistons, so we've got a new set of pistons to go in this thing. That gives us an opportunity to check the rods, give them a clean. So after the rods have been cleaned and inspected, they look okay. So now it's time to assemble. So take the pistons and the gudgeon pin out of the bag, check its orientation, so you've got a notch to make sure it's pointing towards the front of the engine. Gudgeon pin, unpack that. All these components need to be lubricated as you assemble them. Goes without saying. So everything's nice and clean. Give this a wipe down, make sure there's no gunk on the end of it. Lubricate the pin bore. Make sure there's plenty of lube in there. Once we've got that lubricated, the gudgeon pin's going to be next. Put some oil on there. So once we've got that lubed up, clamp the conrod in the vise. Put the little end pinch bolt, we'll take that out. Even though it has a lock washer on it, I like to put some Loctite on it. Make sure we've got the orientation of the piston correct. Slip the pin through. Make sure it's somewhere within proximity of the centre. So we'll put the bolt back in. Make sure that the pin's not protruding past the skirt of the piston. It's approximately equal out with a tension wrench. So lock these off at the manufacturer's specification. I think it was 45 foot-pounds on this one, if I remember correctly. That's it. Locked up. Another 5 to do. That's all 6 done. All packed in a box, ready for rings. Okay, next step, set of rings. Let's open up the box, make sure they're the size that you're after. Take them out of the bags, let's open them up. You need to make sure the first set and the second set have a total of 6 rings. This is a 6-cylinder engine. So I like to count them off. Inspect them as I pull them out of the bag. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Full set. So top ring we've already checked. Oil scrapers, oil spacers, so 6 spacers. In this bag here we should have a total of 12 scrapers. Run through them. Full set, 12, lovely. What I like to do next is to lay them out on a box. First ring, second ring and scrapers. Then get prepared to put them into the bores so we can do some measurements. Slide the first ring in, use the piston, slide it down, screw it up in a ball, set to check it with the feeler gauge. Okay, so next step, first ring's in the bore, grab a feeler gauge. The manufacturers will give you a ratio between bore size to ring gap, so you need to make sure that's maintained. So we get that one done. I like to mark them down where the position is on the board. Grab the next ring. Next ring will be the second ring. I like to make sure they go in the bore in the correct orientation. This particular ring has a dot on it, which is telling you up. So we can press the ring slightly as we put it in the bore. Spin it round. Again, grab the piston, square that up, make sure it's sitting in the bore nice and square. And check the end gap. So the next one after that, I won't bore you with it, but we also do the oil scrapers. Once we've got the oil scrapers, the correct clearances on them, they get written down. Just another 5 to do. Now we've confirmed our ring gaps are good in the bore. I like to clamp the conrod in the vise so you're not trying to chase the piston around the bench. Check your clearances between the rings and the ringland. Make sure you've got some back clearance, nothing's binding. So even the oil scrapers and spacers we do the same. The second ring is installed, make sure it rotates nice and freely. Top ring, confirm that the orientation is correct. There is a difference between up and down. I have used a ring install tool once and I broke a ring. So from that day forward I use my fingernail. Works for me. Now they're installed nice and free. Installed oil scraper and spacers. That's a complete combination ready to go. Ready for install. Next step is block prep. The block came from the machinist ready to go. I always like to recheck and re-clean. Use a bit of white spirit and a relatively clean rag, run around the other bore, and you'll see it picks up some garbage inside the bores. So you need to do every single cylinder. So you've got a bit of grey there. Make sure they're all cleaned out nice and clean. Once you've done that, get yourself a nice clean white rag, rub it through, and the rag should come out spotlessly clean. That's ready to go. We also need to clean all the other surfaces that are on the block. Make sure they're all nice and clean and dry. We also do every surface that's machined, give it a wipe down. We'll get ready for assembly. And once you've got that done, what I like to do is get some mineral-based engine oil, squirt around the bores, put some on my hand and rub them through all the surfaces, all the machined surfaces, give them a coating of oil. They won't corrode from then on. So don't forget the front of the block, the back of the block, and any surface that has been machined and cleaned. So next step, we'll get ready for componentry to go on the block. Also don't forget, we've got the cam bores. We put some engine prep lubricant, put them all on the bearing surfaces, ready for assembly. Now we've got that all lubricated and waiting for assembly. We'll do a crankshaft check. So grab yourself some micrometers, off to the crank. Now these main journals on this particular engine are all different size. So you grab your micrometers, do your measurement, write down all your measurements on a piece of paper and do a calculation. Check with the manufacturer's specification for your clearances, and that'll give you clearances. We can also use plastic gauge. I prefer this measurement. What I did find that we ran into a bit of a problem with this crank. Believe it may have been a bearing supply problem, but we had zero clearance at the thrust surface. So So I grab a pair of verniers, digital verniers, make it a bit easier to read. Did a measurement and we had 39.22 in that area there. We measured the bearing. As you can see, once we do the measurement, 39.22. No, zero clearance, so that didn't help us at all. So a quick chat with the owner. He took the crank and the bearings back to the manufacturer or the machine shop. They then supplied us with a new set of bearings and we're all ready to go. Next step of measurements, the telescopic bore gauge. We set this up. So we do this on all the big ends and all the mains. You put the bearing in, torque them up to spec, then set the gauge, take it to the vise where I set up the micrometers and take your measurement. Once you take your measurement, you then write it down, do your calculation, and they'll give you clearances. And that's done on all journals. Let's get the crankshaft into the block. So we get the bearings, locate the tag, press the bearing into its seat, check the oil gallery orientation, make sure if oil feeds are all present, lubricate the bearing ready for crankshaft assembly. So make sure you got plenty of oil in here. Don't forget to oil the thrust surface. Once we've got that assembled, we'll lubricate the crankshaft. Now the crank's ready to go into the block after being lightly oiled. All the bearings have now been coated with engine assembly lubricant. Slowly lower it into the block, taking care for that thrust bearing not to bind up. Rear main seal's on the crank. There she is, in the block, ready for caps. Now I like to get the main cap with the thrust, put it in the block, check its orientation. You have an arrow that it points towards the front of the block in most cases. Tap it into place, get some sealant around the rear main seal, back corners of the block. Install all the main caps, tap a screwdriver in very lightly, tap the main cap for its thrusts to settle, torque all the journals into place, rotate by hand. Lovely. So we measure the thrust, make sure that's okay, turn the block over, ready for set of pistons. So pistons already set up, put the ring compressor on, make sure everything's well lubricated. Put some rubber tube on the studs so we can slide it into the block without damaging the crankshaft if it's not quite aligned. And slide it in the hole. Once we've got it inside the bore, make sure the ring compressor is square with the top of the block. I like to use a hammer that's got slight weight to it. Make sure the piston's correct location is forward. Tap it into the block. Then with your fingers, push it down to the block to accept the crank. All the way to the bottom, turn it over, well lubricated bearing, slide the cap on, lubricate the threads, spin the nuts on. Once they're up, tension them into place. Once we've got that torqued up correctly, go to the front of the crank, turn it over by hand. Everything's nice and free. Excellent. We've just got another 5 pistons to go in. Ready to go. Full set of pistons in the block now. So we should have some extra effort on the crankshaft rotation due to the piston ring drag. Everything's turning over freely. See you in part 2.